Hello, welcome to Shaman Sister Sessions, episode number 54, Dark Night of the Soul. I'm Catherine Bird, and I am here with my shaman sister, Michelle Hawk. And we are doing this podcast because we're having so many amazing conversations. Michelle and I have known each other for years and been supporting each other in our shamanic and healing work. And we wanted to bring these conversations on what's going on in our practices, in our lives as healers and mentors and facilitators, and bring these to the public so that you can benefit from our experiences and learn more tools and how to work with yourself and with your clients and other people. So we are talking about the dark night of the soul, and I guess let's jump right in. We're also going to say, and I'll say it again at the end, but to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. And let's see, Michelle. So, dark night of the soul sounds like fun.
Yeah, I think it sounds like fun. I mean, depending on your version of fun. I love digging into the dark stuff. So yeah, sure, it's great. I think it's interesting. When I was reflecting on our talk today, I realized my definition of that dark night of the soul has shifted somewhat over the years, and kind of there's sort of the commonly perceived, commonly portrayed aspect of that really intense part of the awakening, and yet ultimately there's so much sweetness there, and there's so much richness there. I mean, really, it is a super potent moment of opportunity for anyone who's in that point. So we'll be talking about these different energies at play in the dark night of the soul. And let's also start off by saying everybody's had this. Everyone, we're talking about it from the perspective of moving through the spiritual awakening as the seeker. There comes that time, probably more than once, let's be honest, where we go through this point of the dark night of the soul. And it can last, a short time, it can last a long time, it can last years, depending on how we move through it. So what we'll be talking about today are what are some of the signature components of the dark night of the soul? How can we get the most out of it, and how can we understand it so perhaps it's a little bit less uncomfortable? And then what are some tools that we can use to move through that so that the next time it comes around, you can be more prepared, because it will come around again.
Absolutely. And that, that often we are able to, hold space and shepherd other people through these processes and these moments in their lives. And, the more information and context we have and are able to share with others, the better, because this can be some of the most lonely sort of feeling that we can have at different times, where we really feel all alone and unheard, and nobody understands what I'm going through at this moment. And so people really need support and help, even if it's just to have the awareness that they're not alone, and that there are people understand, and this is normal, it's part of the process, and it's okay, and you're going to be okay. So we want to offer you those tools for you to help and support other people as well.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about what are some of the key signatures of the dark night of the soul. And actually, even before that, what is it? What are we talking about? I think a common component that people experience in dark night of the soul is this waking up experience, or awakening experience. And that aloneness, really, I think, is one of the key signatures of that. Is you realize there's something more to your life than what you had previously thought. Maybe you've been working a 9-to-5 job, or maybe you were raised in a religious setting, these are some of the very common examples that we see. and you have an epiphany moment, you have a wake up moment, or you just, that gnawing feeling that there is something more. And there's a death phase, really, because that's the primary function of the dark night of the soul, is moving through the death phase of the shamanic death and rebirth cycle. And this is a term, the dark night of the soul is a term that is particularly prevalent in speaking about shamanic practice and the shamanic awakening specifically. However, it is a common theme across many different traditions and cultures.
Yes, and it can also, it's a very, catcher in the rye. Early 20s, often people will have an experience of going away to college or setting out on their own and realizing that things aren't what they thought and aren't what they were taught, and they're not who they've been sort of trained and educated to be. And that is also, and often the kind of first initial experience of what we could call the dark night of the soul. It might not have anything to do with an awakening of gifts or shamanistic abilities or any of these things, but there's a radical awareness that what I have known before, what I have thought about myself before, what I have thought about the world before, is being turned on its head in such a way that I'm not really sure where to go or what to do next. And I feel like I have lost my footing in the world. And there's a lot of confusion. There can be a lot of fear, questioning our motivations, our path, our purpose on the planet, questioning our beliefs, our belief systems, both religious and spiritual, and our relationships, our relationship with our child self and who we were before and who we're stepping into.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that's a lot of what, that questioning phase that you mentioned, Kat, is super, super important. I'm wondering, can we hear a little bit about some of your dark night of the soul? Or I know we've all, honestly, let's be totally transparent at this point. We've all been through a couple by this phase in our lives. So I'd love to hear, let's pick one, and I'll do the same. I'm not exempting myself from this share exercise.
Let's see. I would say, okay, so this is a very common period. So I mentioned kind of that early 20s period of going away, leaving the home and having that. And then another time when a lot of people have this experience is in that Saturn returns, sort of 27, 28, 29, 30 maybe area of life. And at that point was when everything changed. Everything changed for me. And what I was doing before as a career and my life path, my life purpose since I was a child, was all of a sudden in question. I was receiving this inner awareness and this message that it was no longer important, that it wasn't what I was supposed to be doing. It wasn't my calling anymore. The friends that I had, I was no longer resonating with. I didn't really want to hang out with them. I was like, what are you guys even talking about right now? This is no longer important. There was this very deep feeling inside that what I was doing was not important. And it wasn't what I was supposed to be doing. And in that, there was so much struggle because I didn't know what was next. I didn't know where I was supposed to be or what I was supposed to be doing or where I was supposed to go or what to study or what to focus on or where to put my attention or my energy. All I knew is that everything that I had been doing no longer meant anything. And this was so scary to me, and it took away my identity. And I think that that's the big piece, is that the identity that just crumbles. And I remember being at parties or whatever and having people say, well, so what do you do? And I would just stand there and stare at them because I had no answer, because my whole life before that, I was very clear, this is what I do. And I had this very firm sense of self and identity. And at this point, I no longer had that. I had no like North Star anymore. I was lost in the desert and couldn't figure out who I was at all. And what a struggle that was in my life at that point, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think you mentioned a lot of the key signatures of the dark night of the soul there. This, the death of self and the identity structure crumbling. Really, that's one of the foundational pieces right there. I've got a couple that readily come to mind, one of which I've shared about rather extensively on our podcast, about my abusive relationship. I think that was a dark night of the soul for me. I'm not going to tell that story again because I've told it on our Predators in the Spiritual Community episode. So if you're interested, go tune back there. But one of the other main points for me, I think, was at that time period that you referenced, Kat, about that going to university and being in your early 20s and kind of that shift from teenager to in your 20s phase. At that point, I had already started studying and practicing Reiki and shamanism. So I was going into an academic setting already immersed in my spiritual practice. And my degree is in animal physiology and behavior. So I was in the science department, and I was hanging out with pre-med students and people doing microbiology and taking data and spreadsheets. And like, I love data and spreadsheets. I'm a very scientific spiritual practitioner. It's one of these fun little juxtapositions, and I love it. I absolutely love combining these worlds together because they both feel really true to me. When I was there in that academic setting, however, it was incredibly challenging because I was surrounded by people who were so focused on this one sphere, this one state of being, that there wasn't room for this other part, which to me was just as true, if not more so. And so here I was, privately on my personal time and when I was going home for breaks and stuff. And, I was building my crystal collection in my dorm room, and I was like, doing animal communication work on the weekends I was starting to market myself a little bit. And I was, going home to visit my Reiki master on break and continuing my training here. And yet while I was in university, there was a certain amount of rigor and dogma associated with the science department, not from my professors, but from my peers. My professors were actually far more open to that kind of thing, where I was asking questions about, maybe energy healing has a role to play in modern medicine, and maybe I'm going to do my end of the year project. I'm going to do my thesis project on acupuncture for this one class. And I'm going to, talk about energy healing from the practical perspective in my health and medicine class. And the professors, for the most part, were cool with it. I think there's like, yeah, great, go do that and like talk about your findings, and there's room for that. And yet when it came to talking about this with my peers, I was shut down repeatedly. And it was an incredibly disorienting experience to feel very, very ostracized from my academic community for suggesting that perhaps there is this other thing that is also true. I find that period of my life I've gone back and thought about considerably and really delved into a lot of the layers there. And it strikes me as so counterintuitive and very ironic that I was in a setting where you are supposed to be open to new ideas, and you're supposed to have your worldview expanded, and you're supposed to discover alternate truths. And here I was trying to bridge these worlds together, and most of the people that I were talking to were having none of that. This is the truth. This is the way of being. We are scientists, we are investigators, we are researchers, and there's not room for this alternative thing in here. So that was a time where I felt very isolated. I felt very alone in a lot of ways. And it was, again, one of the, you go off to college, right? And like, of course, you're reforming your identity, you're reforming who you are. And there was this other layer to that I didn't really know was going on at the time, but creating space in my energy field for all of these truths to simultaneously exist and know that they are not mutually exclusive.
Absolutely. So, it's kind of like, I think one of the pieces is, what is the purpose, right? Like, why does this happen? Why are we going through this? And, within that, there's this space for it's like the process of having to go in and break up the soil and the really hard soil and pull the rocks out and, go through a very struggle of tearing up what's been there the whole time and become compacted. And just, this is the way that the ground is. The ground is this way. It looks this way. It slopes this way. This is what it's growing. This is how it is. And actually going through the process of digging into that earth, which might be hard. It might have rocks in it. It might have weeds that need to be pulled up. It might be at a crazy slope and it needs to be leveled off. And everything that goes into that toil and strain, that at that point while you're doing it, you often can't even see, you can kind of plan and maybe vision in your head, but you often can't even see what's going to come next, like how the soil is going to become more fertile and soft and yielding, and the level and the gardens that are going to grow and the fruit that's going to come. But in order to have that fruit, in order to have the flowers and the life that's coming later, there has to be this point when things go through this destruction phase. And it's just not an easy moment for a lot of people. But the more we go, okay, well, I really hate this. I really hate digging. I hate weeding. I hate hoeing. I hate like shoveling. I hate this. This sucks. This sucks so much. And we like stand around and stare at the ground instead of actually doing the work. The longer it takes, and the more we're kind of just stuck in that moment, and the longer it takes to get through to the other side. So
the counter side to that, and I think I might have mentioned this a while ago. It was a couple of years ago that I think I was listening to a Matt Kahn lecture or podcast or something, and he's talking about digging out the rocks. And I remember I had this epiphany moment where it's so easy to get obsessed with, I have to get the soil perfectly clear, so if we're using this pulling the rocks out of the soil metaphor, like, okay, yeah, we want the big boulders out and we want the chunky rocks out, but at what point are we going to stop sifting out the grains of sand? So there's that tendency on the opposite end of the spectrum too, where it is really, really easy for us to get obsessive and perfectionistic, and have that counter side where we just sit in the dark night of the soul and we don't go anywhere because we're sifting. And of course, there's always going to be more shit to sift through. Right. There's always going to be more rocks.
At a certain point, you just have to plant something. And even if it's not the thing, it's not maybe where you're going to end up, it's not the path that you're going to be on forever. Sometimes the best thing to do is just plant. Just plant a tree and see if it grows. Just plant something and like hope for the best. And if it grows, awesome. If it doesn't, you go, okay, well, let me do a little bit more work and let me plant something different. That wasn't the tree that was meant to feed me. Okay.
Or at least a cover crop. Just like
plant something.
Get something in there. The one of the signatures before we move on to moving through that dark night of the soul, when I was considering our episode today, I was really thinking about why do we go there, and why how does it suck us in, and how do we benefit from it? And one of the things that I came up with is really that dark night of the soul is that liminal space between forgetting and remembering. Because when we're going into that darkness, it's because there's some aspect of us that has forgotten who we are, and has knows that there is something that needs to crumble and some part of us that needs to die. And there's this fear around that, because, as you know, until we remember, think about that uncertainty, right? Like, we don't know what's on the other side. We don't know where we're going to go. But then ultimately, when we soften into that remembering, there's, oh, of course I am supported. Of course I have, new community who's showing up. There's talking about the fear of like that aloneness, right? The aloneness and the questioning. Well, the only reason we feel alone is because we forget that we are completely loved and surrounded and supported. And we forget that there are people out there who can see us and who are waiting for us to step into that truth. We feel that questioning because we forget that we are divinely inspired embodied beings who are doing our radical purpose here on earth. So there's that space between the forgetting and the remembering. And that, I think, is that dark night of the soul, where there's this recognition, the thing that I thought was true is not true. And the grief that comes from that process of allowing ourselves to mourn this previous lifetime. And there's that recognition of like, there's something that I forgot. And until I discover what it is, that's that point that we're moving through that darkness, that dark night of the soul. And then when we remember, we come out that other side, and there's the rebirth process there.
Mm-hmm. And, we will go through this over and over again. And sometimes there's small little baby ones that happen, and sometimes they're huge, just so intense and big, life changing. And, for a lot of people, common places that they happen right in the early 20s, kind of leaving the home, that Saturn return, kind of late 20s, there's generally a shakeup there. There's generally, the midlife crisis is also often truly a dark night of the soul at that point. Maybe when the kids leave home, like empty nesting and that moment. And then generally as we age as well, we'll definitely hit it a couple more, maybe one or two more times, as we confront our own mortality and our own, aging process, and what that is, what that looks like for each one of us. And, how we're, moving through to the other side. And you could even say that death is also sometimes the dark night of the soul, of the last one that we hit as a human before we're reborn into the light again. So.
Mm-hmm. And in addition, there's also dark nights of the soul that are prompted by life events, such as ending of relationship or divorce, or losing your job, or losing a loved one, or other traumatic sorts of events. And it's not necessarily due to the trauma that this dark night of the soul occurs, but there's a life shakeup. And there's something that it makes you question, or makes you come into identity restructuring as a result of that. And quite often, especially for people who maybe haven't surrendered themselves to that process, quite often that's what it takes in order to have that life shakeup. Because when we get comfortable, we're not really seeking out change. So then change has to come find us and shake us up a little bit in order for us to step into that wheel, that cycle of change, that process.
And, as we're like, another, like, why, what is this that's happening for us, is that it really is a simple process of evolution, and that we are here going through an evolutionary journey in each lifetime, and finding more clarity and more awareness, and finding ourselves remembering ourselves more and more and more. And so there is this evolutionary cycle that we're going through as we raise our consciousness, our awareness, our empathy, our compassion, all of these things, that it's just a process of that evolutionary press forward that we're all a part of.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And for those of you tuning in, if you've got any questions or comments, please do feel free to chat them in. I know this is something that everybody's gone through, everybody will go through. We all have our own different flavors of that dark night of the soul. So what is its role in that spiritual awakening? And, so if we're talking about our dark night of the soul and then supporting our clients through this or supporting other people through this, how can we really get the most out of it and dig into it in such a way? You're talking about the evolutionary press, the evolutionary process. What other opportunities can we keep a lookout? And I mean, to be honest, also, I feel like I'm in a mini dark night of the soul right now in my own life in certain ways with some of these big transitions that have come up for me. And I'll just share, Kat was reflecting, you were telling me like last week or so when I was freaking out to you on the phone, that I'm handling it much better than I have in the past. So it is possible when we're going through these dark nights of the soul. I mean, a few years ago, I was having almost exactly the same situation come up, like to a T, scary identical. So you can believe I've been examining the patterns, the energetic patterns that have been going on, because I'm like, why is this happening again? And a few years ago when this was going on, I was a total mess. I was, as Kat pointed out, and this isn't a lovely image, but I lost my place to live and I freaked out. And for 5 days or like 4 days, I was up on my computer on Craigslist almost 24 hours a day looking for a new place to live. Like I wasn't eating, I wasn't showering. It was disaster. And because I was taking it really, really hard. I was doing that kicking, screaming thing into the dark night of the soul. Like, no, I don't want this to change. And now having a similar situation present itself, I mean, I'm not thrilled about it, but I'm doing my practices. I'm doing my self-care. I'm still working. I'm still seeing clients. I'm still, going out and seeing my friends. And I mean, I'm stressed, but it's not totally shutting down my system. And so the other day or last week or so, when I was having a little freak out to Kat, she pointed that out to me. She's like, hey, you're leaps and bounds better equipped to be handling this now than you were a few years ago. And the fact that, she was pointing out to me, the fact that you did your personal practice this morning, even though, and now you're feeling cruddy again, but the fact that you felt great for a little bit and you were actually doing the thing that you know how to do is stellar. So as we move through these dark nights of the soul, we're going to come around to that point again. It is possible to get better at it, and it is possible to move through it more smoothly if we understand what's going on, if we know that there are tools available to us, and if we let ourselves go through that process as a learning journey rather than that kicking, screaming, resisting, or staring at the ground waiting for something to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, one of the most important tools is to actually step back slightly and to see things from more of the spiritual perspective, the larger perspective. Oftentimes we focus so much on kind of the physical reality of what we can see in the moment going on. So in Michelle's case, this thing is happening with my home situation, and this person is doing this, and this means this, and it's very like the situation, the circumstance that's happening for me right now. I'm losing, I'm losing my partner, I'm losing my job. Like this is very traumatic. I'm focused on the experience that I'm having in the physical earthly plane at this moment. And often when we focus solely on that, we get bogged down in our emotions. We become reactionary. We become overly obsessed with trying to fix the thing that's going wrong, instead of allowing ourselves to sit back and see a larger picture of, oh, this is actually opening up something that might be better for me. This is creating space for something new. This is welcoming a transition into more of something that's going to be in alignment for me. And, we can start to kind of calm ourselves down a little bit by welcoming a higher perspective into the experience, instead of kind of trying to fix and hold on and create the thing to be the way that we would want it to be, instead of kind of relaxing and breathing, accepting what is, and acknowledging that quite possibly this is absolutely the best thing that could happen. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it's uncomfortable. I don't really like it, but here it is. And from a higher perspective, this is possibly the greatest gift that I've ever received.
Mm-hmm. That's quite a bit of perspective alchemy right there.
It's huge. Not easy.
It is so much easier said than done.
So much.
We are fully aware of that. We're doling out these pieces of advice. I can assure you, not from a place of like, oh, we do this perfectly, but from the place of, this is something we practice.
We're working on it.
We're working on it very, very actively. And I mean, I've had my moments lately of feeling like I'm kicking and screaming, but there is much less than there was last time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And, yeah. So what else, Michelle? What else is another tool that we can utilize or help people utilize?
Yeah, I would say maintain your practices like more necessary now than ever before, or while you are moving through that dark night of the soul, that crisis place really, and that death phase. It is more important in those moments than pretty much any other time. I mean, it's always important to do your personal practice, but I guarantee you're not going to feel like doing it. You're going to come up with all the reasons that you shouldn't, or aren't worth it, or don't want to, or don't have time, or don't have energy, or whatever. And yet it will not only help you feel more healthy and balanced while you're moving through it, it will give a place for the energy to move through you more easily. It will give you moments of just giving yourself a break from whatever thing you've been working on. Because, let's be honest, you're probably obsessing a little bit about this thing that's happening in your dark night of the soul space. It will help you have a thing to return to. And, because our personal practice, whenever we're making space for that, ultimately the goal is that that's my time. That's my safe space. That's the only thing that I need to do in that time is be present with myself. Nobody needs my attention. Nobody needs my time. Nothing else needs me to be doing anything. That is just for me. And during these times of dark night of the soul, it is more vital than ever to be just with yourself. And be with yourself in whatever's coming up too. When we're doing our personal practice, it's okay if we're crying. It's okay if we're screaming. It's okay if we're upset. It's okay if we're enraged. Whatever the deal is, there is space for you. There is space for your emotions, and there's space for your process. So that is number one gold star recommendation. Do your practices, even in the dark night of the soul, especially when you don't feel like it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. I just had one and I totally lost it. Actually, prayer and reaching out for help is really important, because, like we said, generally there is this sensation of I'm alone. I'm going through an experience that I don't have the ability to change at this moment. I don't know what's next. I don't know what to focus on. I don't know what to do. Like, there's this sensation of like, if I just knew what to do, I would do it, but I don't even know what to do. So,
Are you quoting me right now?
I don't know. Did you say that? Probably.
Yes. Yes.
So it's, letting yourself pray and pray to whoever, however you connect to spirit, source, your guides, however you relate to that, but just to ask for help to release some of this into the hands of a higher power, so that you can start to relax. Like, oh, I've got to fix, I've got to do. Because sometimes there's less doing is needed in these moments, because we get so like, oh, a hamster on a wheel trying to figure something out. And it's more like, okay, please help me with this situation. I have no idea what to do. I am releasing control, and I am letting go of my need to understand why this is happening. I'm letting go of my need to know where this path is going. Please help me to remain, compassionate and gentle with myself through this process.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Vitally important. And somebody's chatting in exactly what I am feeling right now. Absolutely. I hear you 100% completely. So practices, do your practice, do your prayer. I had another tool and it flew out of my mind as well.
One thing I will say is to watch yourself in the kind of the medicating, self-medicating, because this can be a tough time. And so, nobody likes pain generally. So we're like, okay, well, what can I do to just not feel this way? So let me go get on some antidepressants. Let me go to go have a cocktail. Let me eat, let me shop, let me watch TV, like whatever those things are that we can just numb ourselves from the experience. And while it's okay to do those things a bit, it's not like, oh, you're a bad person, but just to watch, like, what am I trying to avoid? What am I trying to avoid feeling? What am I trying to avoid knowing about myself or knowing about my life and my circumstance that might need a little bit of a change that I'm not wanting to change at this moment? But if I would just make the change, things would stop hurting so badly. So that's a big one.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. I actually used to have a much more rigid stance on that than I do now. And I think I came kind of from the opposite perspective of like, absolutely no numbing, no anything. I'm going to sit in this and I'm going to feel everything. And so, a little bit of a self-punishment tendency. And as soon as I recognized that and actually my viewpoint shifted on that a little bit, like during some very serious shitstorming, I was like, maybe it's okay for me not to be in quite so much pain right now. And it's not that it's not that I'm like avoiding it. It's not that I'm pushing it away. It's not that I'm ignoring it. I'm just going to give myself a break for half an hour. And
please. I mean, because I think my next tool would be give yourself permission to do something else. Like, go to the movie, go, have fun, go play, go to a party, like let yourself have some, some space from the experience that you're in sometimes. And, but be careful, like, okay, well, if I'm like every single day, I'm like having 3 cocktails and I'm staying out till 2 a.m. because I don't want to go home and deal with myself, that's one thing. But I'm going to actually go out and be with my friends because I haven't in such a long time. That's a completely different thing. Like, give yourself permission to take a break from your experience.
Absolutely. Kind of that healthy balance. And I took myself on a movie date last night, which was that thing exactly what we're talking about. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go give myself a minute to think about something else and have a different input of information and thought pattern. And it was exactly what I needed. I saw The Shape of Water. It was exquisite. I highly recommend it. It was really beautiful. And part of that plays into this other tool is give yourself new inputs and like new energy, because at this point, think about, like Kat was saying, just get something in the ground. when we're going through that death phase, it takes a lot of energy to die, really. And what you're doing as you're pulling apart, think about if you were literally digging up the ground and pulling out rocks, like that's tiring, that's exhausting work. Same thing energetically, as you're expending a lot of energy pulling out these different pieces of yourself and examining these different parts, tearing down your identity structure, you're going to need inputs of energy in all ways. So you're going to need to be eating really well. You're going to need to be doing your practices, do things. I think a few episodes ago, we had one called Raising Your Vibration. So tune in there for more tools about practices and different things that you can do to raise your vibration, to give you the energy to move through that process of the dark night of the soul. And also doing different things, like, kind of deliberately going outside of your comfort zone in a different way to start creating new energetic pathways, new neural pathways, and start bringing in inputs of new energy. Because the creation part, this is a really common misconception, but the creation phase doesn't start after the death phase. It actually is during the death phase, because there's this, it's not like a black and white, okay, here's the dying phase, and then like when you're done dying, then you start creating. It's actually, there is creation going on during the death process. And so if you're starting inputs of energy, even if it's not the thing that you're moving into, but it's just like, hey, I'm going to watch a different movie, or I'm going to go to a different like event sort of thing, while you're in this death phase, it will give you energy to shift more fully and more easily into that next expansion.
Exactly. And with that, cultivating new energy into your life, have conversations with different people. Your oldest friend, your mom, they know you the way that you have been, and they're going to approach you, talk to you, and keep you within that box. They're going to see you as that. So, having conversations with new friends, seeing a new practitioner, getting new input from people that maybe don't know you so well and can see different aspects of you that are emerging within you, and can hold space for that, and not be like, well, why would you want to do that? And who do you think you are for wanting to do this? And, those things is also really important.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So inputs of new energy, new perspectives. I'll also put out the giving yourself a different means of processing. I think that's a helpful thing too. So if you're, like for me, for example, writing is really easy. It's a way that historically I've processed a lot, where I'll just like sit down and write out a thing, and by the end of the article, I'll have had 5 epiphanies and have a new solution, right? And so for me, writing is a very easy go-to tool for me to move energy, to process energy. And yet, when we are restructuring ourselves, when we are going through this dark night of the soul, we are creating new energy pathways. So it's actually really important to give ourselves different pathways to move energy through. So is this making sense? Not only is it new energy, but it's moving through a different system. So I remember several years ago is when I was experiencing a lot of these big shifts, and it coincided with my dance practice. Or stepping into my dance practice. And that was huge for me. That was really, really big, because as I was moving through this death in this new way, I had these new tools to support me in addition to the writing. So now I've got, dance as a go-to, I've got writing as a go-to. And one of the things that I'm working on this time around, or that's been coming up over the last year or so, has been singing as this new way of processing energy, and using my voice in a different way to process energy. So there's these new energetic neural pathways, for lack of a better term, energetic pathways that are coming up to support these different phasal transitions and give me actually more tools. Because if we're processing energy through the same pathways, it's harder for us to get farther. Whereas if we give ourselves a new pathway, we can have this whole new avenue of growth and expression as well.
Absolutely. That's really important.
Yeah, what other tools do we have? Let's see. Any advice? We have someone asking, any advice on how to let go of the fear associated with the dying energies? Yes, mainly in regards to allowing the new opportunities. Kind of just answered it. Did we kind of just, I don't remember saying anything about the fear at all, but if you got that answer, if you get that answer out of it, quite honestly, my biggest piece of advice sounds sort of useless. I'm really aware of that. But honestly, the best thing I could offer anybody, which is to get really good at being uncomfortable. Because think about, when we're in these processes and we're in the middle of it, it's really uncomfortable and we want to change it. We want to fix it. We want to move through it. We want to numb out. We want to
let go of the fear.
Yeah, we want to not feel that. We're trying to change the circumstances so that we don't have to be uncomfortable. And fear is one of those components of discomfort. So when we get better at being uncomfortable, then it gives us kind of an ability to zoom out. As long as, if your capacity to be uncomfortable is this big and your fear is also this big, there is no room for you to see anything except the fear. But when your capacity to be uncomfortable is this big and your fear is this big, then you have all this room. I'm speaking very metaphorically here. You have all this room to zoom out and see, okay, well, here's where I'm afraid. Here's this bubble of fear. And I don't like it. You don't have to like it, but you can know that there are things aside from your fear that are also existing in this same space, because there's always more than the fear. There's always room for opportunity. There's always compassion. There's always grace. There's always light. There's always other things. It's not ever just this one thing. But as long as our capacity is the same size as this energy, or same energetic size, we won't ever be able to see everything else that's present there too. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
And sometimes we're actually misinterpreting the experience that we're having. We in English, our language is so restrictive actually on our emotional experience. And like we have one pain, it's like pain. We have this word pain. And there's so many different kinds of pain. There's so many experiences of what pain is. And I think fear is also another kind of piece of that. It's like, okay, well, this is an intense experience and I'm feeling a lot. So, but am I misinterpreting the experience that I'm having? Could this also have a little bit of excitement in it? Could it also have a little bit of this inner knowing that something big is happening, that there's a big change occurring, and that I could be stepping into my power and my purpose and my mission, and that I am just feeling so much of a feeling inside of my body that I don't have the proper words and I don't have the awareness of. Maybe I haven't had this exact experience before, so I'm looking for some way, because we have to have a meaning, right? We have to make meaning of everything. So I'm looking for a way to make meaning of this. So what could be the meaning of this? Well, I must be afraid. I must be in pain right now. That must be what this intense experience is. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's like giving ourselves the space to go, okay, well, maybe this is fear. And so that's maybe it's also a little bit of excitement. It's a little bit of I'm, expanding my energy field. In the process of the expansion and the raising of our vibration, as we raise our vibration and go through an energetic change, a shift in our field, the sensation that we feel inside of our body is foreign enough for us to interpret it as fear. as something to be afraid of, to be scared of, because it's different enough that our physical body is not sure what to do with it, and our mind needs to label it. So give yourself a new label for that fear and a new awareness of the possibility that this is you upgrading, it is you shedding and releasing what's not serving you, it is you stepping into your greatness, and like kind of flip it and go, oh, I don't need to push the fear away. I just need to maybe give my mind a different attachment to it.
Mm-hmm. And give it a different opportunity, really. So an example that I like to use is yoga. Yoga is, or any physical practice where we're pushing ourselves in ways that normally we would not. One of the energetic benefits of doing a yoga practice or and I'm picking yoga because there's some hard poses in there, right? And so when you're standing in this pose and you're dripping sweat, and maybe it's the first time you've done this pose and you're uncomfortable and your arms start shaking and you're holding yourself up, and there's this internal dialogue of like, oh my God, I don't know how long I can hold this. Oh my God, like, am I supposed to bend that way? Or like, there's that uncomfortable sensation, that discomfort, that as long as you're resisting, it's going to continue to be uncomfortable. And then and then you shift out of the pose and there's this relief of like, oh my gosh, I did it. I put myself in this uncomfortable position and I sweated it out and I expanded my capacity to be uncomfortable. And while we're in there, there's this like, saying like, okay, hurry up, like, let's be done with this pose. And like, and of course, depending on the yoga class you take, they're always like, modify if you need to or whatever. And I'm a fan of, again, modify if you need to, or, like give yourself a break. And also there is room for you to push your edges as long as you give yourself a safe container to do so. So in that process of, like Kat was saying, giving yourself a different label for some of these experiences, noticing like, okay, there's an energy present in my body that I don't know what it is. And we immediately jump to it as like, this is a foreign thing. Like it must be bad. Like I'm not used to feeling that. Giving yourself that same room, treating it like a yoga practice of like, okay, this is a pose I've never done before. This is an emotion that I'm not familiar with. This is an energy that I haven't ever sat in. So I'm going to sit in it for a minute. I'm not going to try to change it. I'm not going to try to fix it. I'm going to instead notice, like, I am totally safe right now. And you can do whatever you need to do to make yourself feel safe. Like, okay, I'm sitting in my favorite meditation cushion. Like I got my candles lit. Like, even though I'm feeling this thing that feels really unsafe, I can look around and validate to myself that I'm in a safe place to feel this discomfort, and treat it like a new yoga pose, treat it like a new physical practice where it's like, okay, well, I haven't done this thing before, which means like, I'm not going to be good at it the first time, but it's always easier the second time. And then maybe eventually it becomes your favorite pose. Maybe you become used to that energy. You get better you expand your capacity out to here. And then all of a sudden you have all this breathing room to move energy through in different ways, make different connections, see the fear, see the excitement, see that longing, see the opportunity simultaneously, and know that they can all coexist together. Does that answer your question a little bit? I'm assuming so. We gave a lot of awesome information.
That was good. Okay, so wrapping up, anything, Michelle, you want to leave people with about this?
Dark night of the soul. I think letting she says, wonderful. Thank you. Awesome. Letting your dark night of the soul letting it be a little less dark, quite honestly. Speaking personally, I love to dig around and obsess in the darkness. I'm really good at that. And what I found is that there is room for lightness even in that process, even when it feels super shitty, even when it feels really, like that's the only thing I should be thinking about, or like, how could I possibly like go see a movie while all of this is going on. Really bringing so much ease into this process of darkness is, I think, vital, and ultimately does make it easier and does allow us to move through it a little bit more gracefully. And knowing that it is possible for multiple energies to exist simultaneously. That's what I would leave people with, is even if you're in your dark night of the soul and it feels like that's the only thing that's going on in your life right now and it's taking all your time and attention, it is possible to be feeling that and also go watch a funny movie and laugh with your friends. And it doesn't mean that you're not taking it seriously. It doesn't mean that it's not an impactful experience for you. It just means that you are a complicated person, and it will make your dark night of the soul easier if you can remember that there is more to you than that one thing.
I would say that for me personally, one of the things that I've found is that like letting myself be vulnerable and to be witnessed is really important. And this is so hard. This is so hard for me. I am powerful and I'm strong and I'm kicking ass and I am, I am this this representation of who I am. And, like we said, a lot of times this is a shaking of your identity. It's a shaking of who you are in the world. And when we allow ourselves to be seen, to be witnessed, to be vulnerable, to share, to find people who can, hold that for us, then it actually makes it a little bit easier and more easeful to, accept those parts of ourselves, because we can get so caught up on kind of bashing ourselves for not being strong or making a mistake or choosing the wrong thing or whatever the story is that we've wrapped up about it, and needing to appear to the world as a certain way, needing to look like we always have it together, or we never make a mistake, or we're always this or always that. So, for me, I've found that I can, and I'll just speak recently, like really, for about 2 months, like struggling, like so hard inside of something, and having so much negative emotions and pain and just really deep inside of myself and the shadow and all of this. And eventually it took being radically honest and vulnerable and open and sharing and giving myself permission to share my pain and what I'm going through and my experience and how it's breaking my identity and tearing my ego apart and showing me things about myself that I don't want to see. And, all of those things, like sharing that, it softened everything for me. It gave me a new perspectives that I hadn't let myself see before. It it released so much of the tension of the experience, because I'm trying to like hold everything. And it now I'm just like, okay, I'm actually really good. I'm great around this. And I've had this thing come up in my life. I've been struggling like hell. And so, I would encourage that. Choose your people wisely, who you are vulnerable and sharing with, but oftentimes being witnessed in this experience is super helpful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Our reflectors are essential. So with that, we gave you a lot of information today. Happy integration. Go sit with this, because there's a whole lot of different pieces, but hopefully you got at least one, maybe a couple things out of the conversation today. Let us know if you have any questions, or if you've got any topics that you would like to hear us discuss on the show. We would love to hear from you. You can go ahead and email us, shamansistersessions@gmail.com. If you missed any of our past episodes or want to catch up on the couple of episodes that we mentioned today, we talked about the Raising Your Vibration episode. We talked about the Predators in the Spiritual Community episode. I think we might have mentioned another couple, but all of those are up on our YouTube channel. They're also up on iTunes and Stitcher with the audio version, so you can go ahead and catch up at your leisure. We have over 50 episodes of amazing content for you. It's all free. We will happily take donations if you feel like it, but it is our joy to offer that to you. And next week, we are speaking on Wednesday, not Tuesday, right? Yeah, Wednesday next week, which is Valentine's Day. So we have a special Valentine's Day episode about puja and the art of devotion. We'll be speaking with special guest Monique Darling, who is a fantastic facilitator. She's quite frankly, one of the best facilitators that I've experienced with, and I partook of a puja of hers along with Kat. And so we will be welcoming her on the show to share about her work in the art of devotion on Wednesday, Valentine's Day next week. And any projects or things you'd like to share, Kat?
I don't know. This weekend, I am hosting Open Your Channel retreat. Michelle is coming down to help me facilitate. It's going to be so good. It's so incredible. It's so amazing. If you're like on fire and want to come, reach out immediately, because I can maybe get one more person in, and come and join us as we open and connect and learn how to move energy in new ways and connect to guides, and just it's going to be so good. And let's see, Michelle is going to be in Southern California, so in the San Diego and Los Angeles area. If you are interested, we are offering duo sessions, which means working with both of us, which is so much fun, in-person sessions where we get to work on you. And if you're interested in that, we have a Facebook event invite we can send you. Just reach out to us and we can jump on a call and have a conversation and see if that works right for you. And I think that for the moment, that's the main stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the record, that almost never happens. It happens maybe a couple times a year, like 2 or 3 times a year, where we're in the same place at the same time. So either up here in Portland or in the Southern California or elsewhere area. So if you would like to jump in and experience a duo session with us, it has blown people away. And because we've done work together over the past few years, and it is so fun, it's so rich, and you get the best of both of our expertise. So we love to do it. We love to offer it to you. Let us know if you're interested. I am still putting out my offer from a couple of episodes ago when we spoke about alchemy, that I decided like, hey, I just want that to be a thing. So if you're interested in discussing with me about where you are in your process of personal alchemy, I am taking calls about that. This is my gift to you, the first conversation to talk about where are you in the stages of alchemy? Where are you stuck, and how can you move through it? So let me know if you'd like to set up that call. Again, the first one is my gift to you. So you can go ahead and email me directly or contact me through Shaman Sister Sessions if you would like to do that. Again, so much pleasure to offer this to you. It is our gift and our joy to make this work available. Please go ahead and subscribe to our various channels. Give us thumbs up, give us likes. Anything that you do, maybe write us a review on iTunes. Anything that you do to help increase our visibility, we truly appreciate, so that we can increase our availability to make these offerings open to more people, because there are so many seekers out there who don't have this, who don't have a community, who don't have people to talk to, who don't have mentors or guides, and they're struggling through this alone. So this is part of our offering and our service to make these conversations available to them.
And you can reach out to us on Facebook at Shaman Sister Sessions, or by email, shamansistersessions@gmail.com. And we look forward to seeing you next week, and many blessings.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.